Well, welcome everyone. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm the founder and director of the Parent Education Series here in the Sequoia Union High School District. We are very glad to be offering Parent Forum number 3 in English. This is our first event of the fall. We held 2 this summer. So we're just so excited to be here and that we've had such a great response to this event. We actually had a full house and had to close enrollment. I'm sorry about that. If things continue to grow, we'll just need to find more facilitators, but we appreciate all of you for your willingness to join us today for this important conversation. This is an initiative, the Parent Forum is an initiative of Sequoia Healthcare District. And we have online with us today, Dr. Karen Lee. Karen, can you wave? Karen is the Director of School Health at Sequoia Healthcare District. And so she will be one of our facilitators. We also have with us facilitators Bettina Groff and Michelle Holt and Bradley Ostrander from the, you wave everybody, from the San Mateo County Office of Education. So this is a really cross-platform event, as well as my partner, Bev Hartman from the Parent Venture. Hi, Bev.
Hi.
So a great group today. Really glad that you're here with us. During the initial part of the presentation, we asked that you people who are not going to be speaking, mute your audio. Please leave your video on. We want to see all your pretty faces today. So again, we are particularly grateful for our special guest keynote speaker, Dr. Eran Magen, and I will tell you a little bit about him in just a minute. But first of all, thank yous. Thank you again to the Sequoia Healthcare District, the Sequoia Union High School District, San Mateo County Office of Education, and our new nonprofit organization, the Parent Venture, for making this event possible. Here is the format that we're going to follow today. For those of you who are new to Zoom, and I can't imagine too many of you are at this point, if you run your cursor along the bottom of the screen, you will see controls. We're going to be using the chat box a lot today, both for your comments and for posted resource. So again, my partner Bev is going to be posting links about today, links about our presenter, Eran Magen, as well as other information that you will be looking for. And feel free to talk to one another, talk to us panelists. And we hope as you go into breakout rooms, you'll also send us information about your feelings today after you've finished your session. So here's what we're planning to do. We will start with a little short introductory keynote by Eran, probably 15 minutes or so. And then we will follow that with some circle agreements from Bettina Groff from the county. Thank you, Bettina. And then we will move into breakout rooms. So we expect to have somewhere between 6 to 10 people in each breakout room. We want each of you to have the opportunity to talk. We have some question prompts that you will hear about shortly. And then we will come back together and Dr. Magen will offer some wrap-up remarks. But as you finish with your breakout room, rather than having each group share out, we hope that you'll share some feelings and thoughts in the chat because we really want, pardon me, we really want to hear from you. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our speaker. Okay, Eran Magen, PhD, teaches clinicians, educators, and parents how to form stronger, more supportive relationships in their professional and personal lives. Eran received his PhD in psychology from Stanford University and served as the research director for the Department of Counseling and Psychological Services at the University of Pennsylvania prior to founding the Center for Supportive Relationships. For more information, you can visit Eran's blog or connect with him on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, and Bev will be sharing links to those resources in the chat. So let's see, Eran, I'm going to let you take it away next. And before we head into breakout rooms, if you would please introduce Bettina. So thank you, Eran. Take it away.
Okay, thank you for this short and nearly not embarrassing at all introduction. And also congratulations, Charlene. This is a big day to be pulling your mind out of the forest. So I hope it's a good day. And hi everybody, hi especially to the repeat people who were here before and chose to come again. We're all really glad to be doing this work with you. And I think it's such a nice forum to be talking just with each other about what's going on. I'm gonna try to keep my comments to fairly minimal because I really think that the big bonus of today is to get to connect with other parents and talk and commiserate. And we'll meet again on the other side. But I will start with some thoughts to share with you. I'll start by sharing my screen before I share my thoughts. Oh, Zoom. There's always something. Pardon me.
Bradley, does Eran need to be a co-host to share his screen?
Oh, no, I had the option before and it just disappeared as soon as I started my presentation software. One of these days. I apologize. I'm going to try to log in again.
Okay, I'll tell you what.
Huh?
Do we have time? Ron, do you think you'll get it right back, or should we have Bettina share?
Something just happened now. Hold on, this is very exciting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we all seeing things together?
Mm.
It looks like I'm sharing my screen from my side. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, it's a good start. So some thoughts about cooperation without conflict, which is a little bit like talking about unicorns without feet, but at least cooperation with minimal conflict. I think I explained this in the past. This is generally the spectrum of things that I talk about. I think about the amount of emotional intensity that's inherent in a given situation, going from very, very little intensity on the left to a lot of intensity on the right. Today, we're somewhere in the middle of things are pretty good. We want to strengthen the relationship, build more cooperation. Nobody's especially upset yet. This is the context, right? And the general thinking is, how do we encourage other people, in this case, smaller, younger people that we may have sired, to do more of what we want them to do, but without having it be detrimental to the relationship. So a quick recap. Central concept that I use is this idea of the relational bank account. So the account balance is the amount of goodwill that exists in the relationship. And goodwill translates into all of these good things, right? Trust, honesty, being able to be vulnerable with the other person, the amount of effort I'll put in for the other person in the relationship, how easily and quickly I forgive mistakes, and especially cooperation, which is what we'll be focusing on today, right? But this all flows out of the amount of goodwill in the relationship. And that account balance of goodwill is made up of deposits that we make by showing care or respect, minus any kind of displays of lack of care or respect, or, importantly, when we ask somebody to inconvenience them for our sake, which is a lot of what cooperation is about, right? So if the account balance is very, very high, you can imagine that we'll very happily inconvenience ourselves for other people. We might even think in advance about a way to inconvenience in ourselves in order to make the other person happier, right? If there's a very good relationship. If the account balance is kind of low, we might do something a little bit begrudgingly. And if the account balance is basically zero or negative, if we've overdrawn the account, then we might go out of our way not to cooperate with the other person, right? So we want to keep the account balance as high as possible. This is a general framework. Okay, so care and respect is the main thing that I recommend that we think about when we're trying to get somebody else to behave the way that we want them to. So we have to care and we have to respect, because otherwise they won't, right? It can only go so far unless you're willing to physically force them to do something, which I generally don't recommend unless it's a crisis, unless there's an imminent safety concern. So here are some friendly tips. I'm gonna more or less blast through them in more detail. And then we'll do a recap so you can see this again, and I'm happy to send this out for people so you don't need to scribble madly as we go through this. But the general approach is this: pick your battles, right? Be selective about what you're trying to change in your child or in any other person. Aim for improvement, not for perfection. Make sure that you minimize the withdrawals that you make. Make sure you're constantly making deposits, both after you did a withdrawal, but also just in general, right? The more deposits you make, the easier it is to ask for things. And then just the general guiding concepts. I'll talk about how, in my opinion, won't is exactly the same as can't and should be treated the same way. If you think, oh, they could easily do this, they're just refusing, you're setting yourself up for conflict. I'll talk about this more in a minute. The concept of minimum meaningful improvement, that's a very, very important one. I'll touch on that. I just want to give you the word in your head before. And then this idea of swooping in with compliments or praise when there's any kind of improvement. Okay, so in terms of won't equals can't, this comes up a lot, and I just want to be explicit about my personal stance on this. If you're asking somebody to stand on one foot and they could, but they won't do it for you, if in your mind this is just about them being willful, obnoxious, annoying, you know, resistant, and so on, then it's war, right? You're trying to, you're headed for a frontal collision. Nobody wins. Even if you force them to do it, the relationship gets really disrupted. If you think about it, about their motivation in the same way that you think about physical fitness or stamina or something like that, and you think about small incremental improvements, you can get other people to do a lot that they would not have done straight off. So if the improvement looks so much like the way things improve when people can't initially do them, why not just treat it as something that the other person can't? They're not motivated enough to do it. Think of the motivation as a biological shortcoming, if you need to, right? As not having enough skill, or however you need to think about it. But the more you can think about it in terms of can't and less in terms of they're resisting me for no good reason, the easier it'll be for you. Okay, in terms of picking your battle, any kind of behavior you're asking the other person to change, stop and think for a second. Who is this change for? Who is this going to benefit? Is it going to benefit me or this other person? And just be honest about it. And it's of course okay to ask for the other person to change their behavior because it'll make your life easier, right? You're a person too, you're working really hard, you have a lot of stuff going on. But just be clear about it in your head, because then you can also communicate it to the other person. Because sometimes we end up with pretty twisted explanations when we try to convince other people that it's for them when really it's for us. And you can prevent a lot of really strange conversations by just saying, this would make my life a lot easier so that I can then help you with these other things that are important. Once you've decided who this is for them or for you, think about how important this thing actually is and how urgent is it that the change happen. So, you know, everybody wants their young kids to stop using diapers or to stop using pacifiers. And people can get into this mindset that it's critical that it happen by a certain time or at a certain point. But the reality is that very few people in college are still using pacifiers. You know, it just, people get over it. Very few people in college are using diapers. So there's a real question about how urgently does this need to be solved? How critical is it? And this is something that will especially play into this next thing that I'll share with you about the idea of doing incremental slow improvements, right? Because if you can remind yourself that this doesn't need to become perfect right now or tomorrow, then you have a lot more mental space. And you'll see that a lot of these things that I'm talking here are really about reducing the amount of intensity that we experience around wanting to change this other person's behavior, right? Because if we're coming into it with less force, they'll respond with less force. Okay, improvement, not perfection. So let's say you want your child to do homework, clear dishes, wash the house, wash the sister, wash the dog. I have a lot of washing on my mind. You know, practice piano, whatever, right? Think in your head about what behavior you would be perfectly happy with, right? At the end of the road, that's the ideal behavior. And then just say goodbye to this ideal behavior in your head. It's not gonna happen anytime soon, most likely, right? You will get there, but you have to break it down into a lot of tiny steps. If you want your child to practice piano for an hour every day, you cannot start, and your child is not practicing piano at all right now, or practicing for 5 minutes, it just doesn't make sense to argue and threaten and cajole to try to hit an hour immediately, right? So if performance is about duration, that's very easy, right? You just break it down into minutes, and then you start making small increments. What's the baseline? He's doing 5 minutes now. Let's aim for 6 minutes tomorrow, right? And for a couple of days, and then let's aim for 7 minutes, and so on. That's a really easy one. Clearing dishes, clear just your own dish. Won't clear your own dish? Pick up your fork and put it in the sink, right? The fork is meaningful because they get into the habit of clearing something. The amount is then trivial. It's kind of shocking once you get them to just pick up a fork and take it to the sink, how easy it is then to then say, put the fork on the plate, please, and take it. It becomes a lot easier, right? So you're just trying to get them to start the right behavior. Okay, so think about your ideal behavior, break it down into as many steps as you can, going backwards to present moment performance, and then think, what's the minimum improvement that is meaningful? And be very generous about what meaningful means. Very, very generous, right? If they can't pick up the fork, maybe they can put the fork on your plate, so it's easier for you to take it back to the, whatever progress is, just some progress. Okay, so aim for, and then keep doing it, right? So if you continually improve every day by a little bit, you get a lot better in a pretty short order. Whereas if you ask for big jumps, you get enormous resistance and just nothing happens. Okay, so aim for small improvements. Minimum withdrawals. So by withdrawals, I mean this concept from the relational bank account idea, right? Withdrawals are things that happen when you show a lack of care or respect, or when you inconvenience someone. So by minimum withdrawals, I mean simple things, right? Like you can be respectful when you make requests of the other person. So instead of clean your dishes, you can say, could you please bring your plate to the sink? So just minimal stuff, right? Just be respectful. Ask for minimal inconvenience. So whenever you ask somebody else to change his or her behavior, you're asking them to inconvenience themselves on your behalf. That's okay. That's how relationships work. You know, we do things for one another that we wouldn't naturally do if the other person didn't exist. That's fine, right? But see if you can minimize the inconvenience that you're asking of the other person. You want the other person to wash dishes? Make sure the sponge and detergent is ready and they don't need to go hunting for it, unless it's fun for them to go hunting for it, right? Just make it easy as possible for the specific behavior you want to happen. And again, just connecting to the previous point, just ask for the minimum meaningful improvement and be clear about it. I'm not gonna belabor the point because I think you all get that. Okay, in terms of constant deposits from that same idea. So certainly after you made a request for a behavior change, you wanna immediately praise any kind of cooperation or improvement that you see. And just the basics of praise is you wanna be specific and you wanna be genuine, because they'll sniff you out in a second if you're not. So if you say, you know, hey Henry, please put your fork in the sink. I'll get everything else, don't worry about it. And Henry picks up the fork. Henry touches the fork and lifts it in the air. And as soon as the fork loses contact with the table, you say, thanks, Henry, I appreciate it. Like that, like that's it, right? That's enough. That wasn't super specific, but Henry will probably get it, right? If Jody practiced piano for 7 minutes, you know, and the timer went off, and until the timer went off, you heard the Mary Had a Little Lamb going, then we say, good job, Jody, you practiced for 7 minutes today. That was exactly what we agreed. Awesome. Right? Just like that, like simple, small stuff, but praise, because it's improvement and you want to lock it in. And when you praise, it's like you staple a behavior in place, right? So always just find the improvement and immediately provide that praise. Similarly for cooperation. By sharing power, I mean that it's incredibly helpful to let other people boss you around if you want to boss them around a little bit. I've played this stop game a lot with little kids, including my own, where, you know, I want to encourage this safety behavior. When I say stop, they stop in case they're running off a cliff or into the road or something like that. So we play stop, but they can also tell me to stop, and it becomes a game. right? So it doesn't have to be that reciprocal. I don't mean you need to pick up your own fork and take it to the sink or whatnot, or do your homework. But if they ask things of you, think very carefully about how you respond to them, right? Because what are you modeling? Cooperation, not cooperation, I'm more important, I have things to do, don't you tell me, and so on. And just generally being nice is a good idea. Okay, when I say be nice, I mean all these different things. We're not going to cover any of those, but just to give you a sense of the kind of stuff that you could be doing, all of these constitute deposits into a relational bank account. There's lots of things. None of this is going to be rocket science for you. You know all this stuff. These are reminders. Okay, so summary. If we're trying to get more cooperation and specific behavior change from the other person, pick your battles. Aim for improvement, not perfection. Visualize perfection and then go way back. And then figure out what's the minimum meaningful improvement. When you ask for the change in behavior, do it in a way that minimizes withdrawals, right? So be respectful, be caring, and ask for the least amount of inconvenience. Constantly deposit, both immediately when you get cooperation, but also just during the day, because the stronger your relationship, the more likely they are to want to cooperate with you. You can't just be nice when you want something. That's creepy, basically. So constantly be nice as you can. Remember that if you think about won't the same way you think about can't, and you work on building the ability to want, like building the ability to can, it'll just make life easier for you. Similarly, if you focus on minimum meaningful improvement and you consider it a win whenever that happens, an actual true win for both of you, that'll make your life a lot easier. And swooping, again, just to remind you that if you ask for behavior change, you ask for any kind of inconvenience, as soon as they do it, like watch them like a hawk for good behavior. And as soon as they do it, thank them, praise them, do something, like immediately. Okay, I think that's it. So that was my brain dump on cooperation with less conflict. Maybe I should have titled it. We'll go into the small groups. Talk in the small groups. You have group leaders, you'll figure it out. Group leaders, and I guess everybody will see a message when it's about time to wrap up. We'll have roughly, we can still do 20 minutes. I think it'll give us enough time at the end. So 20 minutes. And Brad, will you be sending out the message that says, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever? Great, thank you very much. So you'll all get that in the groups. We'll reconvene and we'll have some time for sharing from the groups and maybe Q&A through the chat if people wanted to do that. And I will now stop and we'll turn to the main event. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Eran. And now we're going to give the floor to Bettina Groff, who's going to talk with us about some circle agreements for our breakout rooms.
So good afternoon and welcome to today's community. It's just going to be so rich in value and really looking forward to all of us spending some time being together. There are some agreements that happen in the community circles, and so I just wanted to review those. One is speak from your heart, listen from your heart, because this is a great opportunity to share out what you're all going through with empathy, vulnerability, and honesty. So it's really just an amazing opportunity for us to be together. Say just enough. And also, if you want to pass, if you decide you just want to listen and you don't feel like talking or answering a particular prompt, that's okay too. It's about you being comfortable. It's about you being where you need to be in the community. So the big piece is honor the community and honor each other's perspective and their voices. And again, listen with intent. And the last piece is honor confidentiality. So what that means is if you, when you're done with this community circle, if you decide you want to share with your partner or someone close to you about what you contributed to the circle, that's good, that's great. But we don't share out what other people contribute to the circle because it is a confidential space to honor this community. So those are the agreements. And now I'll ask if everyone is willing and okay with the agreements, if we just do a thumbs up. We all good? Okay, so we're ready to break out.
Thank you, Bettina. And I will add, for those of you who may be new to breakout rooms, you'll be put into one of 6 rooms. It'll have a number. You will need to click on your screen to accept entering that room. And then after about 18 minutes of time together, we'll get a little 2-minute warning that we'll be coming back together again. Okay, thank you, Bradley. Okay, looks like we're getting most everybody back. Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Eran. Okay, so while we're waiting for everyone to come back, if you have some feelings or a thought that came out in your breakout rooms, we would love if you would share it in chat. It could be just one word. Maybe you're inspired, maybe you're discouraged. In our group, we really like the advice about what happens when you pick up the fork. So it's not about perfection, it's about the progress. Eran, I'm going to turn the camera and mic back over to you.
Okay. Are we sticking with our old plan of having different group facilitators share a story from the group? Is that the idea, Phil?
I think I'm gonna leave that up to the groups. I actually asked folks to put comments in chat, but if there's people who really strongly want to say something about your group, there's time to do it. Just a minute or two. Anybody from a group?
Well, for me, from my group, I think my main takeaway is that, as one person said and another echoed, this is easy to say and hard to do. It's simple stuff, but it's hard to implement. And I think that, going slowly through a detailed example and thinking hard about really what is important, how important is it, are we coming at it? It's like a mediation issue, right? When two people argue over whether or not a dog should be shot, and it turns out that one person has a hard time with the fur and the other person, really loves the dog, and just brushing the dog more would be a solution that's totally different. I don't know how coherent this is. Anyway, what I'm saying is that I think two things that I'm taking away from the small group session I was in. One is that real life situations are very complicated. They become much more complicated when the issue itself becomes power. Who gets to decide? And I think the more we can stay away from that, the easier things become. And the more it becomes about who has power, the harder the problem is, because we'll just argue and disagree about it. And so conversely, what I was trying to say about the dog before is that the more we can move away from talking about who has power to decide and more about how do we meet everyone's needs, how do we show that we respect the needs of the other person and care about them, and be clear about what we're willing to do to meet the needs of the other person, the more likely it is that the other person will meet back our needs. So that's some of what I took away from the group's discussion.
I'll share out with our group just a couple of things I put in the chat. One person put, and I think this is a really important question to get some strategies. How do I remind myself to give gratitude and patience? Our group was middle school and high school, except for one person was muted, so I'm not sure exactly how old her children are, but that was a really important thing. Self-maintenance and self-love, and also how entitlement is present at the age of middle school and high school, and how does that factor into the social isolation and being in lockdown. So those are a couple things that I wanted to share out. I think if we could get any strategies on giving gratitude and patience and self-love to ourselves, but anybody else in my group have anything they'd like to share out?
No. Okay. Michelle, how about your group? Any real takeaway messages?
In our group, a big piece was around connection and how we're connecting with our kids, and specifically around adolescent kids and how to sort of steal those precious moments when they are interested in sort of sharing or talking, and simple gestures that we can do, whether it's just a hug or one person shared a strategy, even if they shut the door, to slide a note under their door, like a loving note to a teenager, to let them know that you're there and that you're thinking about them. And also there was the sharing of sort of like the difficult time that we're all experiencing. And so people were very sort of authentic and vulnerable around how we're all collectively going through a huge change in our society and our world, and how to support our kids as they're going through that as well, and missing their friends and so forth. So I would say it was a great group and high participation on all members of the group.
Thank you, Michelle. Boy, I love that advice about the love note under the door. That's a good one. Karen, how about your group? Whoops, you're on mute.
I was actually paired up with Eran in a small group.
Were you? Well then,
yes.
Okay.
So I got to listen to a lot of great advice.
Okay. Bev, how about your group?
I was with Michelle, and I have to say, you know, there was really nice sharing about humanity and how in these difficult times that we find our path to making that connection. And there were good ideas about the range of ways we might do that, but also that we have to be kind and take care of ourselves in order to do that. So thanks.
I love how different groups had really such different focuses. In ours, we talked about quintessential teenage problems. Kids on the phone too much, kids on their video games too much, but the idea that perfection is not the goal, that really being aware of incremental progress and change, like you mentioned, Eran. Everybody loved the story about picking the fork up off the table. If you've gotten that far, comment on it, note it, practice gratitude. So anybody else from a group that has something they'd really like to add?
Oh, I'll just say that I shared with the group that cant is the same as won't. It was like a foreign idea to me. And I think because of that, I will have new or old strategies that I can use that I didn't think I could use. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you. That's a good one. I was raised by a Canadian mother, and she raised us the idea that you can do something, but you may not. That can and may and won't are very different words. So Eran, I know this doesn't happen to you enough in real life, so I'm going to let you have the last word. Anything else that you'd like to add to the discussion before we wrap up for today?
No.
That's more than one word.
I don't have a lot to add. I mean, I left, you know, my small group with a lot of humility. We talked about real problems and of course couldn't solve them. And I think that, you know, this feels very tip of the, what's the word? Little bit on the fork. You say in Hebrew, I don't know if that's an expression in English, tip of the fork. It's just a taste in English, you say, right? So I think there's a lot more to uncover here. I think just like with asking for behavior change, my encouragement for people here is like, take one thing that you think might be helpful for you, right? Like literally write it down on a little note and then look at it a couple of times a day and think about how to implement. So if can't and won't is what opened up a toolkit for Rosanna, then great, then do that. And if, you know, aiming for small improvement is what stuck for you, then great. But you know, I guess what I do actually have to say is that this thing takes thinking and intention outside of the actual moment of conflict, right? You have to plan and prepare for it. It's very hard to suddenly come back to your senses in the middle of a power struggle with your teenage son. So plan for it, have a plan, then stick to your plan. And so toward that plan, I would say, if any of the points from today resonated with you, write it down and just look at it occasionally. So it's in your back pocket when you need to next time that something like this happens.
Okay, and I will say that we will be welcoming Dr. Magen for a Parent Education Series event later in October. I think it's October 22nd, Eran, so you'll be able to see him in person, and that will be very helpful. We've known each other now, what, Eran, 4 or 5 years at least? And I use a lot of his advice even with my children who are adults now. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We hope that you come back for the next Parent Forum, and have a lovely Friday and great weekend. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.